I walked into my family's grand Christmas gathering already sensing disaster, but nothing prepared me for the humiliation of being relegated to the kids' table at 28 years old. That moment shattered years of silent endurance, and I finally stood up to my family in a way that left them completely shaken. I sensed this Christmas gathering would be a catastrophe the moment I stepped inside. It wasn't as if I was unaware of what awaited me. It's a predictable annual pattern. Yet, this particular year, I was determined to maintain my composure despite everything. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Maya, the youngest of 4 children. However, being the youngest has never implied anything endearing or charming within my family. On the contrary, it has consistently been their justification for condescension. By now, I've grown accustomed to it. I'm 28, but in their eyes, I remain the baby. I don't have a spouse or children like my older siblings, but I've achieved success in other areas. I possess a career that fills me with pride, a small but devoted circle of friends, and an independence they appear unable to comprehend. For them, life has always revolved around marriage and parenthood. Nothing else holds significance. Christmas dinner was a momentous occasion for our family. It's one of the rare times each year when we all convene at my parents' residence, a grand, antiquated Victorian estate passed down through generations. It's a house that seems perfectly suited for idyllic family photographs, yet it's a nightmare to maintain. I had always detested the place. It feels cold and distant, much like my parents themselves. Still, it's tradition, so every year I attend, even though I prefer to be anywhere else. I go, for family. I arrived shortly after everyone else. Chris, my eldest brother, was already present with his wife and 3 children, boisterously arranging the table as if they owned the property. Then there was Amy, my sister, with her husband and their infant, always impeccable, always refined, always showcasing their picture-perfect existence. My parents were in the kitchen, bustling about, projecting an image of complete control, while somehow making everyone feel like they were still 5 years old. As usual, I slipped in discreetly, hoping to sidestep the inevitable drama. When my mother spotted me, her face brightened with that artificial smile she invariably wore, the kind that made me feel more tolerated for the holidays' sake than genuinely welcomed. "Maya, darling," she said, offering an embrace that felt more dutiful than warm. "So pleased you could make it. Do find a seat." I barely had a moment to respond before my father's voice boomed from the adjacent room, laden with the authority he wielded to remind everyone he remained the patriarch. "Dinner's nearly ready. Chris, Amy, please get the children settled." I paused there, unsure what to do. I wanted to voice something, but it was Christmas. I didn't want to create a scene just yet. That's when my mother, with her peculiar knack for turning everything into a life lesson, spoke again. "Maya, why don't you join the kids' table? We've reserved a special place for you there with your cousins." I froze. I couldn't believe it. My mother, with her sugary, saccharine tone, had just relegated me to the kids' table, the one they assembled annually with a motley collection of chairs, paper plates, and half-hearted decorations. I glanced toward the dining room. The adults' table was impeccably arranged with fine china, wine glasses, and candles casting an elegant, mature ambience. At its head sat my father, looking as smug as ever, surrounded by my married siblings. No space for me, though. I turned back to my mother, attempting to suppress the anger bubbling within me. I felt the familiar sting, the one that always accompanied their efforts to remind me I wasn't good enough in their estimation. It wasn't the first time they'd made me feel insignificant, but this felt different. This wasn't merely a subtle jab or a dismissive glance. This was deliberate. They knew exactly what they were doing. I forced a smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Certainly, Mother." "Thank you," I managed, striving to keep my voice steady. She smiled back, but her expression held a detachment, conveying she cared little for my true feelings. This was all about maintaining appearances, ensuring everything seemed flawless. I doubt she even grasped the extent of the hurt from such a clear dismissal. Without uttering another word, I walked toward the kids' table, my stomach churning with each step. It wasn't as if I expected anything better, but for a fleeting moment, I'd thought perhaps, just perhaps, they might treat me like an adult. I settled onto a small plastic chair, encircled by toddlers more engrossed in their mashed potatoes than the palpable awkwardness in the air. My younger cousins inhabited their own private world, ignoring me entirely. I gazed at the plates before me, heaped with a sloppy, unappetizing meal. It was as if they hadn't even tried to make it look palatable. I could have sworn I saw one of the toddlers drop a piece of broccoli beneath the table, and I felt an urge to scream. That's when the realization struck me. This wasn't simply about the table. This wasn't about tradition or holiday cheer. This was about their perception of me as inherently lesser. They weren't even attempting to conceal it anymore. And in that instant, something inside me broke. I rose quietly, the weight of my decision pressing down. I didn't need to speak. I didn't need to shout or create a scene. I simply retrieved my coat, slung it over my shoulder, and headed directly for the door. As I opened it, my mother's voice called out, almost too late. "Maya, where are you going?" she asked, her tone now laced with confusion and a hint of irritation. I didn't turn back. "I'm leaving," I stated, my voice frigid. "Enjoy your dinner." The door shut behind me, the cold air hitting me like a physical blow, but I didn't care. My car was parked a short distance away, and I was departing. The sound of my parents' frantic calls faded into the background. I drove aimlessly for hours, eventually finding myself at a quiet diner. Sitting alone in a booth, I ordered something warm, my hands still trembling from the rush of adrenaline. I couldn't recall the last time I'd experienced such an intense blend of fury and liberation simultaneously. That's when my phone began to buzz incessantly, messages, missed calls, the usual deluge. I glanced at the screen. It was my family, Chris, Amy, even my father, all calling and texting. But the one that stood out most was from my mother. "Where are you? We need to talk." "This isn't funny, Maya." A faint smirk touched my lips, one that had been simmering all evening. I wasn't about to answer, not yet. The advantage was now mine. They had no idea what was coming. I set my phone down and sipped my coffee, watching the steam curl into the air. What would I do next? That was the question. And, believe me, they wouldn't appreciate the answer. I remained in that diner for what felt like an eternity, my phone vibrating every few minutes. The messages grew increasingly desperate, each one attempting to draw me back into their familiar charade. Chris sent the first. "Maya, this isn't funny. Where are you?" This was swiftly followed by one from Amy. "Mom is freaking out. We just want you back." Then my father. "Come on, don't act like a child. Get back here." I didn't reply. I owed them no explanation. They had made their choice when they treated me as a second-class citizen at their cherished dinner. All I had desired was to be treated as an adult, but instead, they had decided I was still the baby who belonged with the toddlers. After about an hour, I finally picked up my phone to review the messages again. The tension was becoming palpable, as if they were beginning to grasp that I wasn't just going to roll over. Then my mother's text appeared, and it made my stomach clench. "Maya, I don't understand why you're doing this. Your siblings are concerned, and this is ruining Christmas. Don't make this about you. You're being selfish." I stared at the message for a moment, feeling a fresh wave of anger surge within me. Selfish? They were the ones being selfish. The entire evening had been devoted to their image, their expectations. I had been nothing more than a pawn in their elaborate tableau of perfection. But to her, I was the problem. Predictable. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry at that point. Instead, I simply hit the block button on her number. She wasn't going to manipulate me into feeling guilty, not this time. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. This wasn't a mere impulsive reaction. I had a strategy. I had been wronged by every single one of them, and tonight, I was going to ensure they fully understood the extent of their missteps. Later that evening, after finishing my meal and as the adrenaline began to subside, I decided it was time. I opened the family group chat, where they typically aired all their grievances. There were already a dozen messages concerning me. "This is ridiculous. She's acting like a child. What's the big deal? We didn't mean it like that. I think she's just overreacting." I scrolled through them, my fingers itching. I knew I could simply ignore it, but that would have been the path of least resistance. No, I needed them to truly feel it. I needed them to comprehend that their persistent treatment of me carried consequences. I began typing slowly at first, but then my words gained momentum. This wasn't just about tonight. It was about everything they had subjected me to over the years. "You people don't get it, do you? You truly don't. This isn't just about a seat at the table. It's about how you've treated me my entire life, as if I'm not good enough, as if I'm invisible unless you require something from me. I'm the only one who receives no commendation for deviating from the path you all followed. Marry, have children, play the game. But I've constructed my own life, and I'm thriving. So perhaps it's time you all acknowledge that." I paused before hitting send, allowing the weight of my words to resonate. For the first time in an eternity, I felt like I had control over the situation. I wasn't pleading for their validation anymore. I wasn't going to be their little project. I pressed send. It didn't take long for the messages to inundate my phone, repeatedly, each one more frantic than the last. The first came from my father. "Maya, this is absurd. You're being overly dramatic. Get over yourself." Amy swiftly followed. "You can't just leave like that and not expect everyone to be upset. What did you think would happen?" Chris chimed in. "We didn't do anything wrong, Maya. You need to calm down and return before your tantrum ruins everything for us." Each message struck harder than the last. They still didn't comprehend. They were still attempting to blame me, still making it my fault that they had treated me poorly. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I'd contemplated for a while. I opened the Photos app on my phone and began scrolling. There it was, an old picture of our family, taken years ago, just before things truly began to unravel. A flawless Christmas photo, with everyone smiling and content. Everyone except me, that is. I was present, of course, forced into the frame like an afterthought, but I knew the truth behind those smiles. I knew what had been uttered, what had been implied, all those years. I selected that photo and, without hesitation, posted it in the family group chat. But this time, I added a caption. Here's to the perfect family, always ensuring the youngest one knows their place. Then I switched off my phone. I allowed the silence to settle around me, feeling as though I was finally released from their constraints. I didn't know what would happen next, but I didn't care. They had pushed me too far, and now I was done. I didn't check my phone for hours. It was almost surreal, sitting there without the incessant buzzing and pinging from their desperate texts. The quiet was remarkably soothing, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. For once, I wasn't the one striving to appease them. I stayed awake late, just thinking. I knew what they would be saying behind my back, even if they lacked the courage to say it to my face. My siblings, particularly Chris, probably thought I was overreacting, convinced I was just being the family drama queen again. But I wasn't. I was finished playing the part they had assigned me, and if they couldn't grasp that, well, I'd let them contend with the repercussions. Eventually, I plugged my phone into charge and, with a sigh, checked it once more. The notifications were as relentless as I'd anticipated. Dozens of missed calls, texts ranging from furious to feigned contrition, yet all subtly underscored by frustration. I scrolled through them all, reading their words with a grim satisfaction. They were unraveling, and I wasn't going to make it easy for them to reassemble everything. My mother's text was the longest. I don't know what has gotten into you, Maya. You're acting as if this is about us, when it's truly about you. You can't just abandon your family like this. You're tearing us apart. Please come back. Christmas is ruined without you. This isn't who you are. There it was, the guilt trip, the attempt to twist the situation so that I became the villain. They always did this, making me feel like I was the one causing trouble for simply desiring to be treated like an adult. Then my father's message. This is childish. We need to discuss this when you've calmed down. And, of course, Chris, if you think walking out of dinner was going to make a statement, you're mistaken. You're making it worse. You owe us an apology. An apology for what? For finally standing up for myself? For demanding to be recognized as an equal in a family that only valued me when it served their purposes? No, I wasn't apologizing for anything. But then there was Amy's message. It differed from the others. It wasn't angry or demanding. It was almost an entreaty. Maya, I know you're upset, and I understand why, but this isn't the way to resolve things. You're my sister, and I love you, but you're pushing everyone away. Please just come home. We can talk about this. It's Christmas, for heaven's sake. I stared at her words for a while. I had always been close to Amy. She was the one who used to defend me when the others ganged up on me as a child. But now I wasn't sure if I could ever truly trust her again, not after everything she had allowed to slide, everything she had silently condoned when she knew it was wrong. I took a deep breath, my thumb hovering over the screen. I wanted to reply, to explain to her that I wasn't being a diva or creating drama, that I was asserting myself, that I was weary of being treated as the perpetual child of the family. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I typed a brief response. I'll think about it. I sent it and put my phone down, feeling a pang of guilt, but I shook it off. I knew I couldn't return to that table without a significant shift in their perception of me, and I wasn't about to let them dismiss this as nothing. The next morning, I awoke to even more messages. Some were from family friends, inquiring about my whereabouts. They were genuinely concerned, but I didn't feel like explaining myself to anyone who wasn't part of the core issue. And then, naturally, there was a barrage of calls from my mother. But one message stood out. It was from Amy again. Maya, I've been speaking with Chris and Mom. They're genuinely upset, and honestly so am I. We're a family. You can't just isolate yourself from us like this. If you don't come home soon, it's going to worsen. Please don't complicate this more than it needs to be. More pressure, more manipulation, and still no comprehension of what I was experiencing. They weren't hearing me. They weren't listening. I recognized their tactic, the one they always employed, trying to guilt me into returning, attempting to make me feel like the instigator of all the problems, when in reality, their refusal to see me as anything more than the youngest child had been the persistent issue. I picked up my phone, opened the group chat, and gazed at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard as I deliberated what to type. I wanted to take my stand, to make them understand precisely why I was finished with their treatment of me. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I was ready to go back yet, not until I was certain they had genuinely changed, until I was certain they saw me for who I truly was. And then my phone vibrated again. This time it was from my father. Maya, we need to talk. You can't just keep running away. You're going to regret this. It hit me like a ton of bricks. The same phrases, the same manipulative guilt trip. I could feel the tension mounting, as if the walls were closing in around me, but I didn't respond. Not yet. The day stretched on, and with every passing hour, I felt the increasing pressure of their texts, their calls, their attempts to reel me back into their orbit. But no matter how many times my phone buzzed, I maintained my distance. I had made my decision, and I wasn't about to let them bully me back into the role they had assigned me. As evening drew near, I found myself sitting alone, gazing at the empty chair opposite me, where I would have been if I had returned. A part of me, an old part, yearned to give in, to go back and make amends. It was Christmas, after all, a time for family, for togetherness. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if I returned now, it would be akin to admitting I wasn't worth fighting for, that all those years of being pushed aside were acceptable, that they were right, and I was merely being dramatic. I thought about the photo I had posted in the group chat, the one where I was forced into a smile, relegated to the side like an afterthought. That picture had articulated everything I needed to say. I wasn't just upset about tonight. I was upset about every year they had treated me this way, every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering where I was confined to the background, never truly given a voice. They assumed I would simply acquiesce and accept it, as I always had. But not this time. And then the phone rang again. This time it was my mother. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the decline button, but something inside me prompted me to answer. Perhaps I was finally ready to hear what she had to say, or perhaps I was simply curious how far they would go to evoke guilt in me. I took a deep breath and pressed the green button. Maya. My mother's voice came through, sounding weary and exasperated. We need to talk. This has gone on long enough. I remained silent, allowing her words to hang in the air. She waited for me to respond, but I said nothing. Look, she continued, we're family. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I don't know what's gotten into you, but you're alienating everyone. Your father's upset. Chris is upset, Amy. She paused, clearly struggling to compose herself. I'm upset, Maya. I almost laughed. They were upset? After everything they had put me through, they had the audacity to express that? I could feel the old anger resurfacing, but I suppressed it, unwilling to let her see how deeply she could still affect me. I'm not alienating anyone, Mother, I stated, my voice calm but firm. I'm simply not participating in your game anymore. I won't sit at the kids' table, be treated as if I'm invisible, and pretend everything is fine. She was quiet for a moment. I could almost hear her processing my words, trying to strategize how to steer the conversation back to a guilt trip. You can't just leave us hanging like this. Your father is trying to make Christmas special. The entire family is here. It's not just about you, Maya, she finally said, her voice almost pleading. You're tearing the family apart. You know, I countered. I've dedicated my entire life to making everything work, striving to conform to the mold you all designed for me. But no one ever truly saw me, did they? You didn't want me as an adult, Mother. You wanted me to remain the little kid forever. And tonight was the breaking point. She was silent again, and I could tell it was finally registering with her. For the first time, she was hearing what I was truly saying. It wasn't merely about the seat at the dinner table. It was about how I'd been treated my entire existence. I'm sorry, Maya, she said eventually, her voice soft, uncertain. I didn't realize you felt that way. Yes, well, it took me a long time to realize it too, I replied, my voice softening just a fraction. But I'm done pretending. There was a lengthy pause, and I could feel the tension in the air, even over the phone. For the first time in forever, I felt like I was finally being heard, like I had command of the situation, and it felt good. It felt empowering. Finally, she sighed. I understand. I truly do. But I'm still your mother, and I just want us to be a family again. I allowed her words to linger for a moment. There was a time when I would have rushed back to them, desperate to mend everything. But I was no longer that person. I had learned the hard way that they would never change unless I compelled them to truly see me, to see me as an equal. I'll consider it, I said, echoing my earlier response, but this time it carried a different weight. It wasn't about me capitulating, it was about taking my time. It was about them realizing that I wasn't just some afterthought, that I wasn't going to let them pull me back into their toxic dynamic without genuine change. All right, my mother said softly. I hope you return soon. I just want you to be happy. I ended the call and leaned back, breathing deeply. It wasn't over. It wasn't a neat, clean resolution. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had seized control of the situation. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore, and perhaps, just perhaps, they would finally see me for who I truly was. I set my phone down and stared out the window, watching the snow fall gently in the darkness. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of freedom. And as for Christmas, it wasn't ruined, because for the first time in my life, I was going to prioritize myself. The rest could wait. As I sat there, observing the snow descend softly outside, I couldn't help but ponder. Did I make the right decision, or did I simply abandon something that could have been mended? Share your thoughts in the comments below.